So I want to do this video, and the title will pretty much address who it's aimed at. And Jeff, I followed you and subscribed to you and been basically like a friend online through YouTube with you for almost a decade. Well, over a decade, we'll put it that way. And I hear what you have to say about AEW, and it's one of the promotions you do like. And I'm with you on that. It's one of the better promotions that's come up, out of the ashes, if you will, of any past promotions over the past decade or so. 20 years, 10 years, whatever you want to call it. And it has proved to be a good alternative. It's giving, us characters and, matchups, and sometimes when done right, stories that WWE fails to do themselves. Which would explain why, not just the wrestlers and backstage talent and agents and all that want to go work for AEW, and legends included, but it also explains why the fans are going to AEW kind of in droves. But I hear what you have to say sometimes when it comes to your reviews. I mean, when you like something about AEW that you feel shows the potential it has to become that next big wrestling sports entertainment promotion out there, perhaps even surpass WWE, you let it be known. I mean, being a fan for over 30 years, almost 40 years in a sense, you let it be known that you see the potential that AEW has to offer. However, you also let it be known that when you notice things that need to be worked on, need to be addressed, you're basically not afraid to say it. You're not afraid to say it or anything. And if there's anything that one longtime wrestling fan to another can appreciate and respect, is somebody using that experience as a fan to point out the positives and the negatives, and basically point out how how they can keep the positives going and make them better than what they are now, as well as address the negatives and what they need to fix to get them out of that negative zone that they're in currently. And that's the one thing I've respect about Off the Rope Show and OTRS Central, which it evolved into. The fact that you let your true feelings be known. And as I said one time in a video, when you do the praise God Ugga deal or the tribal chief deal, knowing what let's say Roman Reigns is supposed to really be on SmackDown and everything, but yet you're playing it up as he's something else. And that if there's one thing I've enjoyed about those kind of reviews, is what I notice with you is you're having fun. I mean, the fact that when it comes to Randy Orton, at times you would bring out the alter ego, the Blue Borton. When Bryan Danielson as Daniel Bryan, or any of the pro wrestling indie workers that are now names in WWE and all that, would have some near 5-star matches, you'd bring out the Smarkus Mark character to kind of represent the fans that feel that way, or as you view them feel that way. So and by doing so, you basically are having fun. You're making the whole thing fun for you to enjoy and get down with. But again, you have the experience of a longtime fan, to where you feel and believe that you have the right to give your unbiased, your unscripted, shoot style like opinion on what you feel is good about AEW and what they need to do, as I said, to keep that good going, and what is bad about it and what they need to do to get out of that position of bad that they're in. But here's the thing, though, and this is the other thing that you joke about as well. You kind of joke about as well to make things fun. You talk about how all the fans out there that support AEW and support the indie style wrestling in the WWE, you always joke about sarcastically at times, or just for fun, of them going on the flaming keyboards of fire to counteract what you're saying. And again, that's another example of you having fun. But the reality is, though, Jeff, what these fans are actually doing, and I said this myself, and I've said this a couple of times too already. It's the fact that it's not just, you know, fans defending AEW and basically saying there's nothing wrong with AEW, it's all perfect and all that. What they're actually doing, Jeff, is they're rebelling against it. You know, they're rebelling against it. That's what they're doing. You know, with all due respect to Alex Six, the Lex Man, you know, he's still a WWE fan. He's still a fan of WWE. But the reason he takes these Raw cleanses, these WWE cleanses, these breaks, and instead focuses on AEW is because he's part of that rebellion, you know, that rebelliousness. He's part of it. And all he wants by being part of that rebellious, you know, group of fans is they just want WWE to get better. They just want WWE to realize, hey, look, you are a wrestling company. Your company was built on wrestling. You need to get back to that. Or, hey, you see what AEW's doing? Take a page out of the playbook and apply it to your shows and see what happens. This is why when, you know, people watch SmackDown, why they look at SmackDown as basically being, you know, like WWE's interpretation of AEW. Because of the storylines with Roman Reigns, storylines with Edge and Rollins. You know, the wrestling is more focused on, and of course that's because Fox wants it to be more sports oriented, and wrestling is a sport, so they have to do that. But you get the idea. You know, this is why fans are more supportive of SmackDown over Raw, because Raw doesn't have that initiative by USA to be more sports oriented, to focus more on the wrestling. SmackDown has that initiative. They have that motivation given to them by Fox to do so, to do just that, I should say, in opposed to what Raw's doing. But again, you take those fans that like SmackDown and look at SmackDown as WWE's equivalent of AEW, maybe AEW Light, if you will, and, you know, despise what's going on Raw, and are more supportive of AEW as a whole, and basically look at AEW as a company that can do no wrong, the number one, the this, the that. You know, it's because they're rebelling. And if they, and in their minds, in their mindsets, Jeff, if they want people to stop rebelling against, what I'm trying to say is, in their mind, you know, if people want them to stop rebelling against WWE, you know, and support both equally, then all they want WWE to do is get better. Take a page out of what AEW is doing, out of the playbook, apply it to the shows like Raw and SmackDown, and, you know, go from there and see what happens. Put more emphasis on the wrestling and all that. And also, in a sense, just like AEW does, give bullet points to the men and women that compete in that ring for your company, but then let them go out and use those bullet points to say what they have to say of their own accord, without, you know, any scripts and stuff being handed to them, or scripts or anything being ripped up. You know, just let them go out and try to feel natural, if you catch my drift. But the reality is, Jeff, that until that day happens, you know, as much as you and I and all these longtime fans have a right to be very opinionated, you know, about what's going on with AEW, addressing the positives and the negatives, you know, which a lot of the, as you put it, AEW marks and die-hard fans will not, until the day that WWE wakes up and says, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're TV 14 again, and oh, we're about the wrestling now from now on, and now we're going to have our blood and guts hardcore matches again, and oh, in between we might have a little TNA, and we're not talking the wrestling promotion. You know, until that day comes, fans are going to still continuously rebel against them, and they're going to ignore. This is what they're going to do. They're going to put their fingers in their ears and go, la 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 la, I can't hear nothing. You know, that's what they're going to do, because they don't want to hear anybody like you, me, maybe JD from NY, Alex, you know, who are big supporters of AEW, even Alvarez, who people think works, you know, on the ends, who's basically working under the table for AEW, or anybody else. Same with Meltzer. You know, basically they don't want to hear anybody talk ill of AEW until the day WWE basically becomes like AEW, so that they could see who's going to be the better and some more superior product in the end. I mean, long story short, Jeff, they crave the wrestling wars of the 90s and the early 2000s. That's what they crave, and they want that back. You have this new generation of fans that have heard about the wrestling wars of the 90s, and they see what it, and they have the WWE Network, and they see how good it was. You know, not just from hearing what people have had to say that experienced it, fans, wrestlers, and all that, but watching the product themselves. And they crave for that again. Even though Dynamite is on Wednesdays, Raw is on, you know, Mondays, NXT 2.0 is on Tuesdays, SmackDown is on Fridays, and if you want to count it, Impact is on Thursdays. You know, despite the fact that all these promotions are on different nights, all they want is that wrestling war back. And until they get it, you know, to finally see out of all these promotions, primarily WWE and AEW, see who is the more superior, you know, group. And until WWE wakes up and allows that to happen and takes a page out of AEW's playbook to make that happen and go back to that 14 rating and all that, you know, they're not going to want to hear anything like guys like you or me or anybody else has to say about AEW when it comes to pointing out the flaws about it. Because again, all they're going to do is stick their fingers in the air and go, la 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 la, I don't hear a thing. All I hear is the goodness of AEW, da 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 da. That's all they're going to do. Because they don't want to hear it. And that's why, Jeff, that despite, let's say, you know, last night, you know, you coming out and talking about, you know, the fact that, you know, it didn't make sense for, like, the main event to be the way it is. Or the fact that we had to be 2 hours the following, or the past week, you know, for Rampage, even though it was at Arthur Ashe Stadium and it was given the Grand Slam subtitle. You know, even though you feel that these are things they need to work on, they need to address. I mean, you point out that Jade, you know, even though she won her triple threat, you know, hardcore match as it was being promoted over Nyla and Thundra, you know, over Nyla and Thunder Rosa, you know, even though you point out that, yeah, she is green, just like everybody else points out and everything, and you agree with that, yeah, she is green, but she has that look, she has that charisma that you want to build your women's division around for your company for in the you know, when it comes to future planning. You know, despite the fact that people will point out to you, yeah, Jade's green, why are you cheering for her? And you try to counter by saying, well, what about everybody else that's on the roster? There's some of them that are green too. What they'll do is they'll be like, no, we don't hear nothing, no. Because that's what they'll do. You could say, well, you say you see Jade's green? Well, what about this person or this person? And after they point out that Jade's green, and then you try to counter it by, you know, you saying, oh, this person's green or that person's green, this is what they do. As soon as you start saying, oh, well, Jade's green, and this is what they do. That's what they do. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. What they want to hear from you, honestly, Jeff, and from other people that, you know, are fairly balanced out in their opinions, what they want to hear is, oh, by the way, guys, welcome to OTRSCENTRAL, and I have some good news for you. Here on OTRSCENTRAL, I'm here to announce that I am a full AEW fanboy. Everything about AEW is cool. You know, that's what they want. Because they don't want to hear somebody come out and basically give an unbiased opinion. That's why. So, despite the fact that, yes, you have a right, like I do, to be a fan of Jade, and yes, even being a fan of Jade, you're willing to, you know, point out, you know, that she is green. You're not hiding that. You know, the thing is, you're not ashamed or afraid to call it like it is or tell it like it is. And when you try to, you know, and I know I sound like I'm repeating myself here, but when you try to point that out to others that, hey, you're calling her green, you're calling this person I like green, but what about these other people? You know what they do? They don't hear it. They shut it out. Just like I showed you, they do this. They shut it out. They don't want to hear it. Because it's not what they want. What they want to hear from you, what they want to hear from others, like even, let's say, top work rate productions, is AEW is the greatest of all time. It's going to beat WWE. Yay! That's what they want. I mean, if they had, I mean, honestly, Jeff, you know this as well as I do. If they had the power to control AEW, to control wrestling, you know, they would basically, you know, they would nullify They would have Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotundo nullify that 90 days thing, that 90-day non-compete clause, nullify it, show up in the Battle Royal next week to celebrate the 2-year anniversary, win it, and then challenge Omega at Full Gear and say, Omega, you and I, we're gonna face each other in a barbed wire massacre match. That's what they would want if they had the power to do so. And believe it or not, they're hoping that happens. They're hoping at least Bray shows up and wins it and then gets the match at Full Gear. That's what they want. You know, or that's what they want to have or want to see occur if they had the power. So Jeff, in closing, I'll say this. What's made me a fan of you in OTR Central, even during the days of Off the Rope show with you, Triple T, Route, B-Rad, Metal D, Mike Johnson, that is, or Mark Johnson, I should say. What's made me a fan is you guys are honest in your opinions. You're unbiased. You tell it like it is, and you're not afraid to, you're not afraid to just, to point out the flaws and the positives. You're not. And when you come out and you point out those flaws with AEW among the positives, all people are going to want to hear from you is the positives, and they're going to shout out the flaws because they don't want because all it really is, Jeff, like I said at the beginning, is they're rebelling. It's a rebellious tactic, is what it is. In their minds, like I told you at the beginning, they believe if they rebel enough, it's going to wake WWE up. It's going to make WWE come out and say, from now on, we're TV14, we're going to have hardcore matches with blood and guts and barbed wire and all that. And oh, by the way, once in a while, we'll show you a little TNA, and we're not talking to wrestling promotion. That's what they're hoping happens if they continue to rebel against WWE by supporting companies like AEW because of what they do, what they stand for. I mean, yes, there are some good things they're doing, like the Owen Hart Foundation deal, the John Huber, Brody Lee Foundation deal. Trying to focus on being a fan-oriented company. These are all good things, but as a lot of people point out, with the good comes the bad. With the positive comes the negatives. And you said it best. Accentuate the positive, hide any negatives. And, these are things they have to work on. And if you try to tell that to a fan, as you point out, they're not, as you point out, and I've pointed out here in this video, nobody's going to want to hear it. They're not. And that's the reality of it, Jeff. That is the unfortunate reality. So, in closing, like I said, all this really is a rebellious tactic. That's all it is. That's all it ever will be. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. Until they get what they want, until they get WWE back to what they feel it needs to be, so they could start choosing, okay, who's the better promotion? Is it WWE? Is it AEW? Who do I choose? Who do I side with? Until they get that wrestling war back that we used to have in the 90s, they're going to continue to rebel. They're going to continue to ignore any negativity that people might say about AEW, and just go from there. But what do you think, Jeff? What are your thoughts? I'd like to hear back from you if you get the chance, and anybody else that watches this, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check me out at Teespring, as well as BW Rosses at all your audio podcast locations except for Pandora, as well as check me out on Patreon at BW Rosses Brian Walmer, as well as check me out on Vimeo at BW Rosses for some content you can't get here on YouTube, especially PMVs, AMVs, and all that. But let me know what your thoughts are, and Jeff, I'd love to hear from you on this as well, most importantly, and I'm out.